Welcome, brothers and sisters, to Magic Me. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the Akashic records and about this fabric of our universe that we know so little about. In my previous video, I talked a little bit about how the universe is basically all energy vibrating at different frequencies and intensities, and that our thoughts are also just energy that are sending out these vibrations that can have an effect on the universe around you. And in fact, every thought has a very concrete, definite effect on the world around us. There's been a little bit of a misunderstanding, I believe, on the way that this works. The recently popularized idea and theory of the law of attraction states that every thought is creating the world around us. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. However, it doesn't necessarily work the way that we think it does. And there are many factors that go into that. You know, there's intention, negation, and like I talked about before, potency of thought, and a plethora of many things that goes into the recipe for creation. But by and large, every thought does have a concrete, lasting change on the world around us, and it does this through this fabric that is underneath and permeates the universe around us. It is the real universe. The world that we see in the physical plane is not necessarily unreal, but it is just one level of consciousness. The level of consciousness that we operate in large part, not entirely, obviously, but this fabric, there are many layers to. And the one that I specifically want to talk about today, I feel like I'm being led to talk about, is the Akashic, or the etheric fabric that is spoken of in many religious texts, such as the Book of Life, Akasha, the Akashic records, as mentioned by Edgar Cayce, who we're going to talk a lot about on this channel. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because it is all important and for every human being in all walks of life, and especially for someone on the path of spiritual advancement. And that is because the Akashic record, as I'm sure you know if you're at all familiar with this concept, records every deed, action, or thought that you ever express in your lifetime. And whenever you really begin to contemplate that, it becomes a little unsettling. And I'm not trying to scare anybody with this, but I mean, I'm sure if you're anything like me, there are plenty of thoughts and deeds you could think of that you don't necessarily want to be out there in the universe forever. Well, unfortunately, that's the way it works. Every thought that you think sends out an energy signal vibrating at a certain rate at your own specific frequency that makes an indelible impression on the fabric of the Akashic records and is recorded. And that is one of the changes that our thoughts have on the universe. Okay, and this isn't something that is recorded, in my humble opinion, to be held against you in a court of law or so that you will burn in an eternal lake of fire. It simply is, okay? And it's used for our own progress. And the reason why this is so important to me is that we often find ourselves being stuck in set patterns. As creatures of habit, it's only natural that we do something for the first time and obviously it's more difficult. The second time you do it, it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier. And the reason that that is because our brain, when you do something for the first time, is literally charting a new course. It is hacking a fresh trail through the jungle of your mind, right? And each time it does that, it gets a little bit more solid and a little bit more concretely as it creates these new neural pathways in your brain. And so the more you repeat any given function, even carrying out the same thoughts or the same thought pattern, it becomes ingrained or hardwired into your brain, into these neural pathways. And eventually those can become automatic. And if you're not careful, environments and situations of the past can have you thinking a certain way, and these thought patterns will become hardwired into your brain and become a part of your personality, to where you will continue to have the same thoughts, the same thought patterns, even though today you're a very different person than you were 10 years ago. And so it becomes really important to pay attention to what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your emotions, and where your focus and where your attention is going. Because as you're repeating those thoughts, you're sending out these signals to the universe that is being imprinted on this fabric, that is recording. And I mean, this comes into play with spiritual growth and progress as we continue this cycle of rebirth. And you know, not necessarily everyone wants to be here for all eternity. The goal is obviously for us to learn and grow and eventually be able to move on to higher realms of existence. And for me, it becomes really important to consider the footprints that you're leaving behind. I'm going to leave off there. I just wanted to just briefly begin this discussion of the Akashic records and the footprints that we leave behind with not only our deeds and actions, but with every thought that we think. And I think it's very important to recognize that thinking something and physically doing something are two different things, but at the same time, they both leave a lasting impression, and they both are recorded in the Akashic records. And Jesus, in several places, talks about how a thought having the same significance or importance as the action, or at least that it has the potential to do that. And that can be problematic, and it can also be very powerful if you know how to use that and you're using it correctly for soul development and for the betterment of all. So I'm beginning to ramble a little bit, so before I move off into another topic, I invite you to like this and subscribe if you're not already a member, and check out my Facebook page, Magic Me, if you haven't already. I just wrote an article on there about the power of habit, and I went into that subject in much more detail if you want a little bit more information. And these two topics go hand in hand if you're considering that habits are causing permanent impressions on your Akashic record. So stay tuned. Please give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you don't like this. Give me some suggestions. Let me know what you think.